you need to, in your process of actually creating a go-to-market strategy, an outbound strategy, you need to know, first off, what are your main value propositions to cut up your offer into specific value propositions. You want to do the same thing for pain points and the problems that you solve, right? So dissect them into as granular of a level as possible. And once you have identified all the specific value propositions, all the specific problems, all the specific pain points, then you're creating this mental map, right?
Welcome to the Founders Book podcast, where B2B founders share the secret behind their success. I'm Patrick Guilla, helping B2B tech companies boost their conversion using Webflow. And today I'm sitting with Balsa Kosic, founder at Prospeqt. I'm glad to have him here to discuss how he's building AI-powered outbound engine for B2B company. And I think that will be a really interesting discussion for going into deep into the go-to-market and all outbound strategy. So let's get cooking. Balsa, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Patrick. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm doing great. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, really busy. So for the audience and people who do not know you, could you please just introduce yourself and share a bit about your background?
Yes, of course. Well, my name is Balsa. I'm the founder of Prospeqt. We are basically a B2B sales automation agency, mostly focusing on cold email as an acquisition channel. And we use AI to essentially scale your best message so that you can start a conversation with your total addressable market.
We will go a bit deeper into the AI feature and how you build outbound funnel and create those discussions for your customer. What was your background before starting Prospeqt and starting to build that company and that AI outbound?
Yeah, interesting. Well, man, yeah, where to begin? So when I finished university, I always had this idea that I wanted to work in finance, right? My idea was mostly I was still very uneducated, fresh out of college, and uneducated on the opportunities in the world, right? So probably what I kind of wanted to do in finance was mostly around investing, capital markets, all of that stuff. But I somehow ended up in a corporate finance role, right? So this was my first kind of real job out of university, and it was for a Fortune 500 company. And yeah, I was mostly just doing corporate finance, right? Not the most interesting work, at least for the type of person that I am. So yeah, I didn't really like it. I felt kind of, out of place a little bit at least. And I wanted to make a move into sales. So at that point, I quit that finance job and I moved to Berlin. And there in Berlin, I was trying to get a job in sales. I was trying to up my skills for an SDR role. I was applying to jobs, like anybody else would. I probably didn't know the things that I know today. This was 3 years ago or something like that. And essentially I was just clicking the quick apply button, right? So most roles, and there was not a lot of traction happening for me. So I was like, man, what is going on? I'm sending all of these applications, nobody's inviting me for interviews. It was also probably like the worst time. It was kind of like after COVID, German economy not doing the best. I'm in a new city. I don't speak the language, and it was not a great time. I was like thinking, what am I gonna do? Like why can't I break into sales? So during this time, as I was trying to get better, right? So I started consuming content around sales, around the SDR role, and the status quo was you should make 60 cold calls a day, and you should be sending like 50 cold messages per day, right? So this was the status quo of like a bunch of these people that were trying to coach up people. Oh, this is what you should be doing, right? So somehow in this time, I stumbled upon this cold email space, right? And I was like these guys are doing kind of like the same thing, but they, instead of sending 50 messages per day, they send 10,000. And it was also just about the time where AI was like, taking off, right? I don't know. It was probably the launch of GPT somewhere in there. And, and I was very intrigued. And I just made the decision, okay, I'm not gonna apply to jobs anymore. I had some money saved up from the work that I was doing. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go all in on this, right? Well, I'm going to start my own agency. Like this was the, like you make the decision, you're like, okay, this is what I want to double down on. This is what I want to learn. And this is what I'm going to do now. And yeah, Like essentially then I invested maybe a couple of months, like learned clay, learned essentially the whole game. I started doing it a bit on my own. So I tried to sell some marketing to restaurants, and essentially I started gaining some traction, but I still felt like something was missing, right? Like I was kind of green. It was not going as smooth as you might want it to go. So I decided I actually am going to try to get a job at one of, like, I had an idea of what type of agency would be the best agency for me to join, right? So my idea was I don't want to go to a very, very big agency because they're probably like things are too far away from where I would be if I was to start my own agency. And like, I'm not going to learn the fundamentals, right? So you're going to start from more advanced business complexities, right? So essentially I had this idea. I wanted to join maybe an agency that's still growing on the up. And I essentially found one that I really wanted to join. So I started sending messages to the founder, and then he ignores a couple of them, but I was persistent, following up, and essentially we got on a call went great, and I got a job. Right. So I started off as a GTM engineer at an agency, and within essentially 6 months, I was a COO of the agency. And we went from 20K per month when I joined to basically 100K per month in the span of like 6 months. So we were moving fast, right? Everything was like, this was my first experience of like, going through this like growth. You never know what's happening, what's the next day gonna look like, what is going to be your priority tomorrow, what is it going to be today, and it's always different, and it's just like this wonderful mess that essentially excites you, right? And makes you excited for what's to come, right? And yeah, and at that point, I was really happy at that agency. I learned so much. Also I'm great friends with the founder. We were traveling the world together. We still talk even to this day. But at one point, I was probably 6 months into the COO role. So I was kind of like the second person in the agency. We grew the team to like 10 people, and I just felt like my days are getting stagnant, right? Like I'm not feeling like I'm growing. This was probably like one of the main reasons that, I don't know, like I just felt like I was stuck in a place, and I felt like I needed to make a move in order to keep progressing in my life. So I just decided to quit, and I decided to start my own agency. I felt like that was the next move for me. Obviously, I took all of the knowledge that I gained during my time at the initial agency that I worked at, and then I implemented everything that I kind of envisioned what would create the perfect service for my clients, right? So yeah, that's essentially kind of like the story, the founding
That's
story.
nice. Yeah, that's nice. So basically, so when you decided to move from your past agency and to create your own, was it because you said two things, that you were not growing enough, or you ended up into having some kind of maybe routine?
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, you had a different vision for what you wanted to create for your customer. Is it coming from the discussion you had with previous customer, and you saw some pain or some problem that you thought you would be able to solve by creating your agency?
It's mostly to do with like a very specific avatar that can benefit from this AI kind of heavy sales prospecting service, right? And scaled cold email, right? So I had an idea of, there's like this very specific business type that if they have these metrics, if they hit these metrics, the value that they can gain from cold email is just immensely greater than other businesses, right? And it's
Okay.
simply characteristics, right? It doesn't even have to be a specific industry. Obviously, the better the offer, the better the industry is towards cold outreach and all of these, they're going to be an influence, right? But there are specific characteristics that, if true, the value that you can get from an AI cold email type of service is just immense, right? Because you're still sending very kind of like laser targeted emails, but at scale. Instead of sending 1,000 emails per month, you're sending 100,000, right? And that is the differential.
So maybe can you give us a quick snapshot of the agency today? Is it only you running that solo, or do you have a team?
So at the moment we are 3 people. So it's me. I'm mostly now focused on sales, marketing, and probably like high level strategy for the clients. There is Petar. He's a GTM engineer. Like he's our first GTM engineer. And also there's Kate. She's our virtual assistant. She's helping with the administrative tasks and basically, helping us run the agency smoothly. So it's 3 people, 2 months in. We're still growing. Obviously, I have my ambition is to continue moving, continue bringing on the right people onto the bus, because that's the most important thing at the end of the day, because people make your agency. Whatever, like you as a founder, I think it's mostly important for you to have a vision, and your vision needs to be stronger than anybody else's, right? Your appetite needs to be bigger. It needs to be that big that the people that join you can have their appetite, satisfied. So there's a lot of people joining you, right? So you need to keep on bringing the people onto your bus, and essentially your appetite needs to be as big as everybody else's combined plus some. So that is essentially how everybody ends up being satisfied. Nobody can have the bigger vision than you. So that, I think that's the most important thing that you should have as a founder. And apart from that, you're still going to be this early, right? It's a grind, and you need to be sure. Vision is one thing, you need to have it, but like you need to get your hands dirty. Everything still, like if you need to push something in the right direction, you need to do that, right? And you're going to be pushing on those things. And yeah, man, it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Okay, so you're still in that stage where you still have the end in the engine, if I can say, still having on executing on that vision and also identifying the right people to bring in so you can grow enough, right?
Yes.
I want to have your take on that AI outbound and maybe more on the philosophy of outbound, because I think there is two schools here. There's, the old school, if I can call them that, sending that manually generic messages and we know that today that's not working. It's not working anymore. What I saw from your content and from what you have posted is the data-driven storytelling and also having that really, tailored messaging. I think that's really the key and the differentiator when you are doing outbound and outreach at scale. So if you could give us your take on what is the differentiator or what are your secret sauce basically at Prospeqt for doing outbound for your client.
Yeah, I think there's never going to be a secret sauce, right? It's all about, keeping to the fundamentals and doing them correctly without diversion, right? So I think this is the main key to success. And what are those fundamentals, right? So there's basically, a couple of things that will influence, at least for cold email. I want to say for cold email success, like on this one specific channel, there are 3 main kind of like things that you can pull from. Number one is going to be deliverability. So you want to set up the correct infrastructure so you can keep on hitting the inbox of your prospect, because nothing else matters if your emails are in spam and nobody sees them, right? You can have the best offer in the world. You can have the best copy in the world. You can be hitting the right list. But if it all goes to spam, none of this matters, right? It's just like wasted effort. You could be stuck wondering, oh, what am I doing wrong? Well, my friend, you're in spam. But yeah, if you get that right, if you get that thing right, and it's honestly not it's not a black box. It's not like there's like this like secret technique where you need to do everything is well documented. You can go on the internet and just like find the right resources that are going to help you do this. All the big sending platforms like Instantly, all of them, they have extensive documentation on the best practices for cold email deliverability and how to actually set up your infrastructure. Instantly does it for you as well. They have a done for you service for this aspect of cold email. And also, if you get that right, then you're moving on to the next step, right? And the next step is going to be the targeting. And the targeting is always the lead list. So what is going to be the lead list, right? So how do we typically approach this? Whenever we work with a client, like our number one step and something that I kind of like really want to do for every single client moving forwards is always mapping out the total addressable market, right? So you want to understand what is this total addressable market. And essentially once you map the total addressable, and the important thing is to map out the accounts, right? So the people, you can get them in at a later point as you're creating the campaigns. It doesn't really matter, but the accounts are extremely, extremely important to be completely mapped out, right? And probably depending on the use case, like if you're targeting if you're corporations, larger companies, then you might also want to map the people, because then you might want to also get some data points on people, like, their career history, are they new in role, and things like this. They're going to matter more for larger corporations rather than, like, let's say SMBs, or maybe like even up to 50 people companies, right? But yeah, like once you map the companies, then you move on to the next stage. The next stage is actually segmenting the list. So segmenting the list is, in my opinion, this is your strategy. This is your strategy for creating the best message, right? So how do you then segment the list? So you need to, in your process of actually creating a go-to-market strategy, an outbound strategy, you need to know, first off, what are your main value propositions to cut up your offer into specific value propositions. Now, Alex Hormozy has great content on this, right? And like, I think a lot of people have also read his book, 100 Million Offers, up to this point. It's like one of the most famous business books, I think, ever created. And there's a great outline on how you can cut up an offer into specific value propositions, right? So this dissection can help you kind of identify, okay, what am I doing for people? Like, what are all the value propositions that I give in my offer, right? And then you cut it up and then you list all of them, and then you can kind of have a clearer picture of everything that you're doing. You want to do the same thing for pain points and the problems that you solve, right? So dissect them into as granular of a level as possible. And once you have identified all the specific value propositions, all the specific problems, all the specific pain points, then you're creating this mental map, right? So then this is actually the job of the go-to-market engineer, of the person that's building out the outbound motion. And they need to understand, okay, so these are the problems, these are the value propositions. What are data points that I can kind of logically connect either to the value proposition or the pain points, right? So basically you are creating hypotheses, like you're creating a hypothesis on your messaging. And the hypothesis is either going to be built on a specific value proposition need or a specific problem statement. So this is the core thing. This is actually what produces the most amounts of results, because then once you identify these data points, and the only thing the data points need to provide you with is kind of like leverage on giving your insight, right? So you want to say, okay, so like, let's say you want the data point is going to be the company running Google Ads, right? So there's a lot of assumptions that you can draw in connection to the pain points that you solve, in connection to the value propositions that you do, based on them running Google Ads, right? So you can give your insight either in the form of a problem statement, either in the form of a poke the bear question, or in the form, like this is how a good outbound message is going to look like. You're doing some research and then you're giving insight, and insight is your authority position, right? And essentially once you do these two things, then you have the luxury of offering your service or your value proposition, right? Because you gave some insight, you did your research, and the targeting essentially allows you to do this because you have your total addressable market mapped. Then you have identified 5-10 data points, right? And you're gonna then enrich the total addressable market with these data points. And then you're going to be segmenting out the list. Once you segment out the list, then essentially you're building messaging on a per segment basis. And honestly, this is probably the best way to go about it. We also aim to have a message for the complete market, right? So if we are doing this service for a Google Ads agency, if we enrich the companies that are running Google Ads, we're going to have a message based on them running Google Ads, and we're going to have a message based on them not running Google Ads, because them not running Google Ads is also an insight that we can then essentially wrap around our service offering. And I think this data-based storytelling is a very potent methodology of creating powerful messaging.
You're really segmenting, so taking, as you said, the TAM plus going into segment. And then I saw something, I think it was this week, like if you build your list and your segment and you have the pain point laid out, even the copywriting, it's like natural because you have everything that is laid out. So the message comes, naturally.
This is very important. We do this on every onboarding, right? So every onboarding, this is like the first step in building a strategy for the outbound motion, right? So it's about identifying all of these things, We have an extensive onboarding form that allows us to actually dissect your offer, to dissect the pain points, to dissect the problems. And once we have this, kind of like the hard part of the work is done. And this is the highest leverage activity that you can do for your clients, like setting the outbound strategy right. Once you set the strategy right, the copywriting part is not hard because you're building the copy on a per segment basis and you already know what the segments are going to be.
Yeah,
That's it.
you already have all the intent signals, or you have already all the pain points, and
Yeah. You have
basically the pain points, you have the value proposition, or you may have the offer that
it's
is
about
that is
creating a mental
solving.
map, right?
Yeah,
It's just a map, right? So like this data point connects to this pain point, and that pain point then connects to this value proposition. And essentially you map out 10 of these and then you build messaging on a per segment basis, you know? And
it's like really where you have the added value coming from Prospeqt is into building that strategy and building those pain points, and so you don't end up in some old strategy of, sending 10,000 emails, just, praying and hoping that that one email will, hit the right target. So yeah,
yeah,
definitely. I'm definitely an advocate for that strategy.
the core philosophy is to avoid this kind of like constant uphill battle of, like, let's say you're working with clients and then you consistently have to keep on launching campaigns week in, week out, and you're launching campaigns that then end up being deflated, right? Maybe you even get success, but you cannot create repeatable success, right? There's no, you're not viewing cold email as kind of like this channel that you're trying to max. You're viewing it as like, a repetitive campaign that you need to launch every single week. And then it makes no sense, right? This is maybe something that you're never gonna like have predictable value out of this channel. So our approach is based on like, we're trying to prove these hypotheses is right. And once we do that, we scale, right? And we scale up to the point of how much your total addressable market allows. If your total addressable market allows for, like, let's say if your market is 500,000 companies, we're probably gonna try to scale up to a point where we're contacting the whole total addressable market once every 60 to 90 days. Right. So if your sales process allows that, right, which is another constraint, if there's no constraints like that, then we're trying to scale there. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if you're helping a company with, struggling to reach out to new prospect, and then when that outbound is unlocked, if they don't have the right sales team, or if the sales team is not, the right size to handle the traffic of new leads, even, warm leads, yeah, that could be, the bottleneck. But I mean, for them, that's a good problem to have, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
It
good
means that
problem
you
to
did
do
your job right.
any lead. Actually, it has happened before, believe it or not. Yeah, it has happened quite a few times. You need to stop outbound campaigns that are working because the teams are just overwhelmed. Way too many
That's
leads happening.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that just, validating that you did the job right.
Yeah, yeah, but it's almost you as the person executing the campaigns. You're sad to stop them. You're like, guys, please hire more salespeople. Please, please. There's money left on the table.
Yeah, definitely. Basically, so when you are launching, so when you are validating the hypothesis, or you are doing outbound on, like, pilot run, or just an extract of that time, of that segment. And then when you have validated all of that, iterating on maybe changing the message or changing the data point or the pain point, then you scale and you open up, right?
Essentially, we try not to do any projects that are not at least like up to a certain quantity. So we avoid companies with smaller total addressable markets simply because the value that they can get from automated outbound is not as big as a company with a large total addressable market. So it's very logical, right? The bigger the market, the bigger the value that they can potentially get from this channel, right? And done in this way that we do it. Yeah, we try to work with companies that at least have 50,000 contacts in their total addressable market. And we start our service off by contacting 20,000 people per month and sending 40,000 emails per month. That's the minimum that our engagement kind of commands. And this is kind of like through this quantity, we test a bunch of messaging hypotheses. Like our testing is not based on like this is something that I don't typically like in how other people like at least comment on testing, right? Like testing a bunch of subject lines, testing CTAs. I don't really like this. For me, honestly, I think that makes almost no difference. Almost want to spin tax, and spin tax is kind of like randomizing variables inside of, not variable, but kind of words inside of your email copy. You almost want to spin tax CTAs. You want to spin text subject lines to have variety in your messaging, because I think it really does not make that big of a difference. And essentially, what actually does make a difference is the strategy, right? So it is the messaging hypothesis. It is the connection between the signals, the pain points, and the value propositions. So these combinations, they make huge differences. Probably vibe inside of messages, like how you write the message, how do you position the message, what is the angle that you take on the email? This makes a big difference. So you want to be testing these things, right? Like testing either your targeting, testing your offer, so offer angle, and that's basically it. You test the data as well. Where do you extract the data from? And this is then how you figure out what you need to scale. Yeah, that's essentially the process.
There is so much to uncover here, so we could end up talking about that for at least hours, because I really like that subject. Maybe if we are approaching the end, two questions. So first, you told us that you are doing cold email, but are you using also other channel for your clients?
Yeah, so other channels, at the moment, we don't do a lot of it. We do have a service of also scaled LinkedIn outreach. So this is something that we are doing with a tool called AimFox. The great thing about AimFox is that it actually allows you to hit scale on LinkedIn that was typically not possible through kind of like these avatar profiles on LinkedIn, right? So these are going to be profiles on LinkedIn that have 500 plus connections, but they're like not real people, so it allows you to kind of send a lot of, because LinkedIn has a lot of restrictions for scale. One profile can send a maximum of 25 messages per day, 25 connection requests. So this allows you scale, right? But our main focus is, to be honest, on email. So we don't really do a lot of multi-channel. It's very hard to orchestrate multi-channel at scale. So it's very hard to do that at scale. At smaller scale, it's not that hard. There are tools, right? Like if you're okay with doing smaller scale outreach, it's not hard to do. LinkedIn is the main bottleneck there, and the integration with the email tools, it would be very hard to pull off on the scale that we are, like on our sending scale, right? So our workflows for using LinkedIn are around positive responses. We will, a lot of times, depending on the use case, but a lot of times we will create automations that, like, let's say an interested response comes in on email, we will automatically use the person's LinkedIn profile to send the connection request to that person. And hey, I saw that you responded to my outbound email, blah, blah, blah. And like just these things to like kind of increase conversions from interested response to booked meeting. But in terms of actual outreach, most of our focus is on email, simply because email is the channel that's way more scalable.
Okay, so it's more like a way to maybe warm up the lead before the call, or warm up the lead before,
Yes. Yes.
closing or
Yeah,
closing.
this is LinkedIn is a powerful channel as well. It's just not as scalable, right? Like that is the drawback of LinkedIn, but you can hit much higher response rates on LinkedIn.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so maybe to wrap up here, what are the next step? If you can give us some hints, what are the next step for Prospeqt?
The next steps, man, just doing more of what works, right? So doubling down on what works. We have identified a couple of niches where we see just a lot of success with our methodology of outbound. It's about also hiring more of the right people, right? So we can service more clients. It's about doing more acquisition, so more actually also doing outbound for ourselves. This is something we plan to do actually in Q1. And yeah, just doubling down.
All right. Yeah, that's a good strategy. Okay, so for people, for potential client who want to reach out, or even for people who are interested to join Prospeqt and to have a discussion with you, where they can follow you or join you to have that discussion.
They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm mostly active on LinkedIn. I think that would be probably the best place. and also on my email because I
Okay.
read as well.
You
I
are
read
still doing
I
emails.
read everything. You have to keep an eye. You have to keep an eye on the strategies.
All right, so I will add your LinkedIn, profile to the show notes, and I think that was really interesting. Balsa, thank you really for having, going into the strategy and going deep. That was, I think, interesting. And if there are some, CEO in the audience who want to reach out, yeah, please do. Please reach out to Balsa. I think he will be able to help you and send that email.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Balsa,
Patrick.
for sharing all that process and all your journey. That was really interesting. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe. And I'm Patrick Guillard, helping B2B company boost their conversion using Webflow. See you in the next episode.